Welcome to About the Winelands. In this show, we will be chatting to leaders, influencers, wine producers, restaurants, and other role players. Tune in every week for our latest episode. You will find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram TV, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast. Welcome back to About the Winelands. Today I'm talking to Pieter Ferreira. Pieter is the cellar master at Graham Beck. Welcome to About the Winelands, Pieter.
Thank you very much for the opportunity and looking forward to your questions.
No, we have to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to talk to us. And I'm sure our listeners will find this very, very interesting. If I can start off, Pieter, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get involved in the wine industry?
I always jokingly say I fell into a wine tank and, after some years I'm still swimming. But I did study agriculture in Pretoria, and I'm actually more like a chemist. I did microbiology and various other things. But then one day I just got a beautiful opportunity, and my first winemaking career, I started with Achim von Arnhem in Franschhoek. So I've been very fortunate that the timing was just right. And I took it on, and I was under his mentorship, and I spent 7 magical years with Achim in Franschhoek. And then I joined the Beck family in 1990 when I moved to Robertson.
Oh, so you've been there for a while.
Yeah, it's my 30th. I've just completed my 30th harvest at Graham Beck. So obviously winemakers always speak about the vintages or the number of vintages that you've done. And it's been an amazing journey. I think we've sort of done a full circle on the original vision of Graham Beck. You know, he hired me in those days to be the better example of Cap Classique out of South Africa that we can take into the international markets.
So this is quite interesting. I mean, 30 years is what a milestone. I think when you're a young winemaker and you look, I think you project forward, right? Because like you say, winemaking is almost, you count the years.
It's really true. 30 years is quite young as a brand, so I keep reminding the youngsters that there's a lot of school fees that goes along with it. But yeah, it's been fantastic. The original vision was to be a Cap Classique producer, and then we tried to be everything to everyone. We made some still wines due to the fact that we also had a second winery in Franschhoek, the Graham Beck winery, which was mainly still wines. But then, fortunately, 6 years ago, we did a bit of soul searching, and we realized when we asked the consumer, what is Graham Beck? They all said it's bubbles. So, welcome to Bubble Land.
Well, it's a pity because I remember that Graham Beck Shiraz you used to make was fantastic.
Yeah, well, we've been very fortunate. I think the dedication to the specific products were fantastic. The Rich Syrah was definitely, it got international recognition and things like that. But, at the end of the day, you have to really concentrate on things you can do best. And, my nickname is Bubbles, so, that's where it is.
Well, I think focus in business is really important. Pieter, if you can tell me, I mean, I think, can you give us a little bit of a background on the whole Graham Beck story and the estate and the history? I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, I'll do it with pleasure. Graham Beck was actually a coal miner by trade. So, he ventured into the breeding of thoroughbred horses. He became one of South Africa's leading thoroughbred breeders in South Africa. and he's even taken that to the US, and they amongst the top 5 of thoroughbred breeders in the US. And I don't know if you can recall the Laingsburg flood in 1981.
I actually recall that very well.
Which sadly ran through Robertson as well, because the catchment area of the mountains, we're virtually just on the other side of the Langeberg Mountains from Laingsburg. So a lot of waters flooded the area, and Graham Beck, having his horses in the area, was sort of talked into buying the farm Madeba. And he said, well, once he had the farm, he said, well, let's grow some grapes. And that's how it all started. So the farm was bought by Graham Beck in 1983. In 85 to 87, he actually brought some of his mining equipment down to remove soil where they needed to have soils, and then started the replanting schedule. And the idea of building a cellar came about in 1990, and obviously that's when I joined him. And today, I wouldn't say it's history, it's history in the making, because it takes much longer than 30 years, but we have sort of walked the full circle, as I mentioned before, and that is what we have. So today we only do sparkling wine or by Cap Classique, and we have 8 wines in our portfolio.
Well, let me tell you what, you certainly managed to establish your brand in like you say, 30 years is a short space of time, but it has made an impact.
Yeah, I think we really dedicated, I learned so many things from Graham Beck, through the years while he was still with us. It sounds a bit like a cliche thing, but he says you can only be as good as the people you employ. And it's really rubs down right down to sort of the cellar floor, people in the vineyards and things like that. So, it's such a great mantra that he established for us, and obviously with that comes the loyalty and the dedication to the work we have, got to do. So
you're talking about the estate, which is quite interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about the estate, and do you welcome visitors, and what can people experience when coming there?
Fantastic, yes. Well, today, Madeba Farm is 4,200 hectares big, so it's quite large. But being in the Robertson area, obviously, we can only grow grapes by irrigation, so water is our lifeline to farming activity. And we proud ourselves as well that for every 1 hectare we farm, we actually preserve 5 hectares. And that's given us a champion status in the biodiversity initiative. And so it's really magic. Today we have, once we have done our full plantings again, we will be at around 140 to 150 hectares planted, and the rest is preserved. And we actually have a nature conservationist, Mosi Basson, who looks after the program of sustainability and the preservation of the fynbos in our area. And then we have a beautiful visitor center at Graham Beck, which is open to visitors 7 days a week. Obviously, during lockdown, it was quite crazy. It was lonely. It was like a ghost cellar, really. But now that we can trade again, we are open to visitors 7 days a week.
Amazing. So your the winery in France, does that still exist? And what happens there?
Well, it goes also back into the history. Graham Beck actually he sort of bailed out Jan Picard. Now, most of you won't know but Jan Pickard was the owner of Union Wine, and they had a distribution arm called Douglas Green.
That's right.
And Graham Beck then bought Union Wine, and within the Union Wine makeup, there was the historic farm Bellingham. So he acquired Bellingham Farm in the deal, and then he bought, we built it up to the magnitude. We had Charles Hopkins, which was a Bellingham winemaker then, that joined the Graham Beck family. And then we built it up, until Charles went to the Grendel. So the winery still stands, but it was, you can imagine one owner having two wineries in different locations, just to double up in, expenses towards the bottom line, because everything came out of one pocket, that type of thing. And we then started to say, well, let's consolidate. So the farm, Bellingham Farm, was bought by Johan Rupert, who had Lomera, which was the neighbor.
Okay, excellent. So your journey with MCC, when that started right away when he purchased the Madeba farm, right? And then your first harvest was already an MCC harvest. Do I understand this correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. But keep in mind, I joined the first specialist producer of Cap Classique in South Africa. Achim was the first guy. He was then employed by Boschendal, who was owned by Anglo American, and he was the first specialist producer. It was, Pierre Jordan was only and solely Cap Classique. So from 1984, when I joined Achim, I had 7 years of experience, sleeping and drinking just bubbly. So I think with the original vision of Graham Beck, I was the sort of favorite choice at that point. And we've built it up there. So bubbles have consumed my life, if I can sort of explain it that way. And during these times, I've also worked in Champagne for various harvests. And it's fascinating.
It's a fascinating product, right? And it's always grabbed the imagination, not the least being the Champagne guys being very good in their marketing and creating all kinds of legends that aren't true and stories. But we'll talk about that a bit later. Tell us a bit about the MCCs you're making, the Cap Classiques you are making at the moment.
So from day one, we tried to understand very quickly in the early years, what Robertson can give as a Cap Classique. And we realized with the sufficient amount of sunshine, in those days, if we go back 30 years ago, Robertson was considered a warm area. And thank goodness, the word of global warming has touched so many more people. They're starting to understand that it's warm all around the world these days. We realized that we wanted to develop a wine style or a Cap Classique style, like an aperitif. So you always enjoy the first glass, which cleans and stimulates the taste buds, and then obviously prepares you for what will follow. So the philosophy of Graham Beck is really sort of designed on a typical Grand Marque out of Champagne. By that I mean we have a non-vintage, which is the signature of Beck, which we can do consistently year in, year out, because we have built up a perpetual reserve that we can use to obviously keep the golden thread running in, year out. So we have a non-vintage range, and in there we have 4 wines. We have a white brut blend, a rosé blend, and then we also have 2 bliss nectars. Nectars is just the indication of using a little bit more sugar in the dosage, not for various reasons, but for specific markets like the main market we have in Gauteng. After that, in the next year, we have 3 vintage wines, which is the expression of the best Chardonnay under a Blanc de Blanc label, the best Pinot Noir portions as a vintage rosé, and we have introduced a wine with no added sugar at disgorgement called Brut Zero. So those are the 3 vintage wines. And then above that, we have our prestige cuvée. Some people say, well, it's the icon, which is Cuvée Clive.
Oh, that's interesting. Peter, I'm fascinated with the whole story of how these wines are made, non-vintage. And I have to ask you, do you, like the people in Champagne, the cellar masters, they also carry a key around your neck so that people can't get into your old barrels?
No, we have no secrets. You know what? We love to share. You know, I used to walk around with a key, but you know, you know, obviously at my age where I am now, I have a succession plan, and I have a fantastic guy called Pieter Ferreira, who's been with me for 10 harvests. As I did mention earlier, we work in harvests as winemakers. So Pierre's been with Graham Beck for 10 years. And yeah, he's going to be, you know, he's mini Bubbles now, but he will be the Bubbles, you know, at the time when I can put my feet in the sea sand.
So what really interests me is your marketing and how you're selling and building where are most of your sales happening, and you know, what is your footprint?
Yeah, our footprint is 55% leaves the South African shores to 40 countries, with obviously 2 major markets, if one can talk of, you know, obviously volume in the export market. UK is currently our #1 export market, followed by America, and then sort of the rest of Europe, if you calculate Germany and the Benelux countries together. And then we have an emerging market in Japan. And then obviously just below 50%, then obviously it's local sales. We believe we are a South African brand enough that we've grown our volumes that we can, you know, spread the love between local and export markets.
Oh, so that's very interesting. So you've been quite successful in exports. It must have been quite a hard nut to crack, because you've got all this competition not only from Champagne but also from, you know, Prosecco and also the Spanish, you know, and they have the advantage of being close to the market in Europe. So it must have been quite a tough nut to crack to get South African bubbly really established as a brand.
It's still a lonely journey. I can really tell you that of total Cap Classiques that leaves the South African shores, Graham Beck is just under 50%. So we have very little. We have very little other producers that can support the category of Cap Classique in the international market. I'm sure over time it will change. You know, but it's a lonely journey, and it's a tough nut to crack. You know, you immediately you're either up against Cava, as you mentioned, or Franciacorta, or you know, less expensive champagnes, and but I do believe, you know, as for all of us, I think Champagne is the go-to. You know, everybody has Champagne as a reference. But I can assure you, in the international market, if you go out there and you say, if you're not wanting to drink Champagne today, Cap Classique will be the better choice, due to the sort of price and quality price point ratio that Cap Classique has in the international markets. You know, we have definitely like a little void or a little box that a lot of more expensive wines can't be in there, and the less expensive don't have the quality to play in that market. So But it is a lonely journey. Yeah.
Is that one of the advantages of actually producing in South Africa that puts you in that price point?
Well, I still think it's very reasonable. But keep in mind, all the things use or mainly use has to be imported, and we don't get any. We don't get any support from our government, and it was probably a little bit less expensive to produce. When you get to a level where Graham Beck is, I think sort of volume does make it easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still I think it's still very affordable in the international market. Even locally, I think it's still the most underrated value point in the wine business.
Oh, that's very interesting, and I think it's great that you guys are pushing that. So you're having the Cap Classique organization is having this Cap Classique Day on the 1st of September. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast is to get a bit more exposure for this. Are you guys planning anything special for the day, a celebration or anything like that?
Well, we're planning to open Magnums because it's going to be a hell of a celebration.
There you go.
No, I think there's been, I think the countdown has started. We also recently, only as an association, we've got sort of our house in order. We have a fantastic lady, Caroline van Schalkwyk, who's now running our sort of not administration, but more the sort of promotional and generic drives for the association. And, so the countdown has started. And I think we're going to build on this. I think it's going to be even bigger next year, as Cap Classique will be 50 years old next year, with the first wine that was made by Frans Milan of Simonsig.
Yeah.
So we'll obviously, I think we will for our customers in visiting Robertson, we will definitely entertain them with some special magnums or something really interesting out of our Vinoteq as a celebration for Cap Classique Day.
So should people take the drive out to Robertson on the 1st?
Yeah, we'll even stamp their passports for them.
There you go. So, Pieter, we're talking about magnums. I mean, in Europe, in the last few years, magnums has become like a fashion. It's almost like you take a magnum to a party and things like that. Do you think that's something that will start to spill over to South Africa, more magnum sizes?
Yeah, it's again, unfortunately, it's. People, the consumer is turning their pennies around, and invariably when they look at a magnum, they want to divide their favorite bubbly by half and say, well, that's 2 bottles will cost me that. But, just a Magnum Cap Classique or champagne bottle is so much more expensive. So, it's unfortunately not a direct double deal, but the pleasure you get out of a Magnum is twice of that, from more than twice than having a single bottle. The volume of a Magnum is double that of the single bottle or standard bottle, but the air space is exactly the same. So you have so much more freshness and so much more finesse in a Magnum. And it's definitely starting to become more obvious because it's a great way to celebrate this with a Magnum.
Well, champagnes are made to be drunk, right? So if you want to keep something, I suppose, like you're just saying, it's advisable to keep a Magnum because it will stay fresher for longer.
Yeah, it depends how thirsty you are, that's the other thing. You have to keep in mind, maybe you'll have to have 2 Magnums, I'm not sure.
I totally agree with that. Pieter, this whole coronavirus, you mentioned that a little bit, has really turned everything on its head in terms of business models and stuff like that, and everyone had to rethink. Have you guys got any new ideas and plans and anything in mind regarding that?
Well, I guess, it was really tough to look into the crystal ball because, the sort of goalpost even during COVID has changed from our government. But that put aside, I think we have done a bit of soul searching. We are trying to work smarter. A few things, but we can be thankful from a Graham Beck point of view that we are so well established in the export markets because we could still trade during lockdown. But yeah, it's tough. We had to do a few sacrifices. The whole wine industry has been turned upside down. So I think you have to focus on, again, trying to do what you can do best. And, I'm sure it's going to improve, but it has had a dramatic influence.
The whole, the talk of the day, or the thing of the day is called direct to consumer, where everybody's trying to push their online sales. Is this something that you guys are looking at as well?
Yes, we have. We've had very good direct to consumer programs. Obviously, we're also fortunate that we do have what we call the Graham Beck Society. It's our wine club. And, we've had various Zoom tasting hours with our sort of top customers and keeping the correspondence open. But yes, we've had some successful deals through lockdown. And it's definitely helped to keep Graham Beck in the mind of the consumer.
I think that's the important thing, right? Is you have to keep your brand out there while things are not going well. The other thing that changes, obviously, if you're selling direct to customers, is that you now if you're selling in restaurants or in the retail space, you don't really know who's drinking your stuff. But with this, you know exactly who's buying, and it's delivered to their door. So you build up a database of buyers. And like you say, with your wine society, you obviously have, or your Graham Beck Society, you obviously have that as well. But what I want to ask you is the importance of actually then, if you're doing that, communicating with those clients, how do you guys manage that to actually talk to the people that are drinking your wine or your bubbly?
Well, we have a lady called Lucinda who runs our society program, and obviously we have a quarterly newsletter that goes out, and within there we have our offerings, and she then collates. It's not always the best to speak to the converted, but to keep them interested. And for interesting, we've tried to just one thing that was quite successful. We tried to target our society members who have always bought the non-vintage and very little of the vintage. And we sent them all a 2-pack of a vintage Chardonnay and a vintage Rosé. And we invited them to a tasting now, and we've got them to buy into our vintage collection. So again, it's more important that they can also taste the product, and during lockdown, when we moved wines and, we had roadblocks, checking cars and things like that, it was quite difficult. But, we're managing that way.
Yeah, it's difficult to smuggle out of Robertson, right? It's easy to stop to stop the trucks.
No, well, we also respect. We are of a size that we cannot afford to.
Of course, no, I'm just joking.
Misuse it. No, of course, I understand. Well, it's actually easier. The roads are much quieter,
Oh, I see. So
just bring your Fender trailer next time.
There you go. I think on the 1st of September, right? I mean, you can actually put all the magnums in your Venter trailer if you go down to Graham Beck.
I like your thinking. I like your thinking.
Pieter, your journey is 30 years of vintages, a long career. What is the most important thing you've learned?
That I'm back at nursery school. I really believe that, in the last 5 years, we've, been sort of really eat, sleep, and drinking only Cap Classique. Mm-hmm. It's really shown us the sort of cracks. It's not a negative thing, but, we could look into our quality parameters and, it's amazing the amount of attention to detail that we've been adding over the years. So, I keep reminding the younger Cap Classique producers that it remains a journey. Our mantra at Graham Beck is we're in search of the perfect bubble. And, you would think after 30 years we have it, but the cigar's there, but we haven't smoked it yet.
I've read somewhere there's 49 million bubbles in a bottle of MCC. Is this true?
Pretty much that has been calculated scientifically, so not far off. And if you consider that you could get 6 glasses out of a standard bottle, you will have at least 7-odd million bubbles in a glass. So they do it by high-speed photography. We've actually met the professor at the Rance University who does these studies, and it's fascinating. We keep learning, every time there's something new we can add to our story.
Well, I think that's the secret of marketing. Something like MCC is creating the stories, and you guys have certainly done that. Just want to ask you something about your focus, because have you found, you were mentioning the percentages of Graham Beck in the South African market and also of exports, and it's obviously you're by far the market leader in MCC in South Africa. But have you found that the focus on MCC has actually made a major difference in your success?
Well, I think it's maybe quite a complex question, but I think over time, with about 15 odd years ago, we saw a rush and a flood of wine bars opening, and they started to pour some bubbles, by the glass. I think we immediately got exposure into the consumer's mind that, bubbly wasn't there always just for a celebration or a wedding, that, it became more of a lifestyle drink. And since that was like that, the category has really grown. It still remains the most exciting category in the wine industry today. You have white and red wines, which most probably grows either up or down by 2 or 3% a year, but Cap Classique is enjoying double-figure growth year on year.
Well, excellent. So let's see if we can make that even more. Pieter, I ask everybody this question to give me their favorite wine quote, but of course you can't give a wine, you've got to give an MCC quote.
I was waiting for that. I mean, there's so many classic ones, but most probably the one that I use, and
as long as you don't steal from Marilyn Monroe, you're fine.
No. I'd rather share the bath with her. Apparently she bathed in the champagne, but that said aside, no, I'm not really stealing. I just have a huge admiration for Sir Winston Churchill. Mm-hmm. And it sort of still remains my go-to quote, He had a love affair with Paul Roger, the champagne house. Mm-hmm. And Paul Roger, as a champagne house, always made sure that he got the most matured bottles of champagne because that was his taste. And and a lot of people back at Parliament and things like that often asked him, Sir Winston, what is your best bottle of champagne you have? And meaning that they're going to, hear about all the old vintages and stuff. He says, no, it's surely a Magnum, but make sure your partner does not drink.
I love it. That is fantastic.
So anyway, I love that way, so it's, it's a great saying, and you can relate to it quite easily.
Pieter, I have to say thank you very, very much for spending the time with us. Just one last question. If people want to get hold of you guys, how do they do that?
We have a fairly comprehensive website. It's quite easy to navigate. It's grahambeck.com. But they will find us on social media platforms. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and obviously Instagram. And you just have to type in Graham Beck Bubbly, and you will find the links to that. Alternatively, really, if there's any sort of questions or they want to arrange like a VIP visit, my email is Pieter, Pieter, @grahambeck.com.
Pieter, it's been very, very fascinating talking to you. And thank you so much for spending the time. And good luck with everything. Good luck with the 1st of September, Cap Classique Day. And we'll definitely see that we can promote you guys as much as possible. But thanks for spending the time.
I really, it's really wonderful that, you also giving us some space for the 1st of September, and we thank you for that. And hopefully we can meet up soon once COVID is gone.
We definitely will. Thanks, Pieter. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for supporting our show. If you would like to get more exposure for your business, please have a look at our sponsorship options. Thanks again for supporting About the Winelands. Please follow us on YouTube and on our social media channels. All details and links are in the description.